The night smelled of oil, salt, and fear. Private Daniel Harper sat with his back against a steel wall, knees pulled tight to his chest, fingers shaking as he tried to light a cigarette he didn't even want. The flame flickered and died again and again, mocked by the wind tearing through the open belly of the landing craft. Across from him, Sergeant William "Red" O'Connor didn't bother pretending to be calm. He stared straight ahead, jaw locked, eyes fixed on nothing. Red had survived North Africa, Sicily, and too many men dying beside him. Tonight, even he looked hollow. 5 minutes, someone shouted. 5 minutes until the ramp dropped. 5 minutes until the world exploded. Daniel swallowed. He was 20 years old. Back home in Ohio, his mother still thought he worked at a factory. His younger sister believed he'd be home by Christmas. No one back home knew what 5 minutes meant right now. The boat rocked violently as artillery thundered in the distance. Somewhere ahead, the coast of France burned. Tracers sliced the dark sky like angry insects. Daniel finally gave up on the cigarette. "Sergeant," he said, his voice barely louder than the engine, do you think we'll make it?" Red didn't look at him. "Everyone makes it somewhere," Red said. "Question is where." The words settled heavy in Daniel's chest. A man near the front began whispering a prayer. Another vomited into his helmet. No one laughed. No one judged. Fear had leveled them all. Daniel closed his eyes, but memories forced their way in anyway. He remembered summer evenings by the river, the smell of cornfields, the sound of his father's boots on the porch. He remembered promising his mother he'd come back the same. He already knew that was a lie. The boat slammed hard, metal screaming as it scraped the sand. Geo, Geo, Geo. The ramp dropped. Hell rushed in. Machine gun fire tore through the front of the craft. Men fell before their boots touched the water. Daniel jumped, icy waves swallowing him to the chest. His rifle felt impossibly heavy. Bodies floated past him, faces already empty. Run. Just run. He ran. Sand exploded around him as bullets chewed the beach. The air screamed. Daniel tripped, fell face first into blood-soaked sand, and lay frozen as boots thundered past him. Someone grabbed his collar and dragged him behind a steel obstacle. It was Red. "You breathe," Red shouted. Daniel nodded, choking. "Then you fight." They moved in bursts, 5 seconds, then flat. 5 seconds, then flat again. Daniel didn't think anymore. Thinking was dangerous. Thinking meant panic. A medic crawled past them, dragging a screaming man whose leg bent the wrong way. The scream cut off suddenly. Daniel never knew why. They reached a shallow dip in the sand. For a moment, the gunfire felt farther away. Daniel realized his hands were slick. Blood. He didn't know whose. Red checked his watch. "Command gone quiet," Red said, "which means we're on our own." Daniel laughed once, sharp and broken. "Figures." Red looked at him then, really looked at him. "You got a name, kid?" Daniel Harper." Red nodded. "Listen to me, Daniel. Fear's gonna tell you to freeze. You freeze, you die. You move scared, you live scared, but you live." Daniel nodded, even though fear was screaming louder than any gun. They pushed forward with a handful of others, men whose names Daniel didn't know, whose faces he'd never forget. Inch by inch, they climbed past wire and fire, dragging themselves toward the bluffs. At the base of the hill, Red raised his hand. "Grenades," he said calmly. Daniel pulled one from his vest. His fingers felt clumsy, useless. Red leaned close. "Count to 3 after you throw. Don't rush it. Don't hesitate." Daniel swallowed hard. He threw. The explosion shook the earth. Shouts followed, German voices, sharp with pain and anger. They charged. Daniel didn't remember pulling the trigger. He didn't remember screaming. He only remembered the moment when the firing stopped and the hill went quiet except for the wind and the dying. He stood there afterward, chest heaving, ears ringing. They had taken the position. At a cost. Red sat heavily on the ground, pressing a hand to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. Sergeant Daniel dropped beside him. "You're hit." Red breathed out slowly. "Looks like it." Daniel's hands shook as he tried to help. "We need a medic." Red shook his head. "No time, listen." Daniel leaned closer, tears burning his eyes. "You're not just surviving this war," Red said softly. "You're carrying it, every face, every sound. Don't let it turn you into nothing." Daniel shook his head. "You're coming with me." Red smiled, faint but real. "Kid, if I don't, you still move forward, that's the job." Gunfire echoed again in the distance. The battle wasn't done. Daniel stood slowly, rifle in hand, heart breaking and hardening at the same time. For the first time, he understood. The war wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about what it demanded you become. And it demanded everything. The rain never stopped. It fell in thin, cold sheets over the shattered French countryside, turning dirt roads into rivers of mud and blood. Daniel Harper had stopped noticing when he was wet. Dry was a memory now, like peace. They moved through a ruined village at dawn. Stone houses stood cracked open like broken teeth. A child's doll lay face down in the street, one glass eye missing. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle. "Clear left," someone whispered. "Clear right." Their squad was smaller now, too small. Faces were missing, names Daniel didn't say out loud anymore. Red should have been there. Daniel felt that absence like a phantom limb. They reached a farmhouse at the edge of the village. Intelligence said German troops were using it as a relay point. Intelligence was often wrong. Lieutenant Harris raised a fist. "We go quiet," Harris said. "No shots unless necessary." Daniel nodded, though his pulse hammered so loudly he was sure the enemy could hear it. They entered through the back. Inside, the house smelled of rot and old smoke. Furniture lay overturned. On the wall hung a faded family photograph. Mother, father, two boys smiling into a future that no longer existed. Footsteps upstairs. Daniel's breath caught. They moved slowly, boots barely touching the stairs. At the landing, a door creaked open. A German soldier stepped out, rifle low, eyes wide with the same fear Daniel knew too well. For a split second, neither moved. The soldier was young, younger than Daniel, his hands trembled. Daniel's finger tightened. The shot echoed like thunder. The soldier fell. Silence swallowed the house. Daniel stared at the body, chest burning. The boy's eyes were still open. He looked surprised. "Move," Harris whispered. They searched the rest of the house. No more soldiers, just radios, maps, orders. Outside, artillery fire rolled closer. "We've got to move now," Harris said. As they pulled back into the fields, the sky erupted. Explosions tore through the farmhouse, flames clawing upward. Daniel didn't look back. That night they dug in near a hedgerow. The earth was cold and stubborn beneath their hands. Daniel's shovel struck something solid. He froze. A helmet. Underneath it, a skull. No dog tags, no name. Just another man who'd never gone home. Daniel sat back shaking. A voice broke the silence. "You okay, Harper?" It was Corporal James Miller, older, married, had a daughter he talked about when the nights were too long. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, just tired." Miller studied him. "You shot your first man today." Daniel said nothing. Miller sighed. "You don't forget it, but you learn to live with it, or it eats you alive." Thunder rolled overhead, not artillery this time, just a storm. As rain soaked into the trench, Daniel lay awake, staring at the dark. He saw the soldier's face every time he closed his eyes. Days blurred together. They advanced through fields and forests, through villages that welcomed them and villages that watched in silence. Sometimes civilians cried when they saw American uniforms. Sometimes they just stared, hollow and empty. Outside a small town, the squad took fire from a tree line. Down! Daniel hit the ground as bullets snapped overhead. They returned fire. The forest erupted in chaos, shouts, screams, branches splintering. A grenade landed near Miller. Time slowed. Miller looked at it, then at Daniel. He didn't hesitate. Miller threw himself onto it. The explosion shook the ground. Daniel screamed his name. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left to save. The firefight ended soon after. The Germans withdrew. Victory felt like a cruel joke. That night Daniel sat alone, staring at his hands again. Miller's blood was still there. Lieutenant Harris approached quietly. "You did good today." Daniel looked up sharply. "He died." Harris nodded, "So others could live." Daniel's voice cracked. "That's what we keep telling ourselves." Harris didn't argue. Weeks later, they crossed into Germany. The land felt different, heavier, as if it knew what was coming. In a small town, they found civilians hiding in a cellar, women, old men, children. Fear lived in every face. A little girl stared at Daniel from behind her mother's skirt. She held a stuffed bear missing an arm. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a chocolate bar. He knelt and held it out. The girl hesitated, then took it. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt something warm in his chest. Hope. That night, orders came down. A bridge ahead was critical. The Germans were preparing to destroy it. If the bridge fell, the advance stalled. Thousands could die. Their squad was assigned to take it. Daniel cleaned his rifle slowly. This mission felt different. Bigger. More final. As they moved out under cover of darkness, Daniel felt fear coil in his stomach, but beneath it something else. Resolve. He thought of Red, of Miller, of everyone left behind in the sand and mud. He whispered to himself, "I move forward." The bridge loomed ahead, silhouetted against firelight. German patrols moved across it. Lieutenant Harris turned to the squad. "We take the bridge," he said, "or we die trying." Daniel tightened his grip. The war had taken his innocence. Now it was testing his courage. The river moved slowly beneath the bridge, dark and silent, as if it knew what was about to happen and chose not to speak. Daniel lay flat against the cold ground, staring up at the steel ribs cutting across the night sky. Every second stretched thin. Somewhere ahead, German boots scraped against concrete. A cigarette flared briefly, then vanished. Lieutenant Harris raised 2 fingers. 2 guards. 1 on each end. Explosives wired underneath. The plan was simple. Plans always were. Nothing ever stayed that way. They split into 2 teams. Daniel followed Harris toward the near end of the bridge. The metal hummed faintly under his palm as he crawled forward. He counted his breaths the way Red once taught him. In, out, stay alive. A shadow moved. Daniel froze. A German soldier leaned against the railing, humming softly, unaware. Daniel could hear his breath, smell the smoke on his clothes. This close, there was no room for hesitation. Daniel rose and struck. The soldier collapsed without a sound. Daniel caught the body before it hit the ground. His arms strained, heart pounding. For a moment the weight felt unbearable, not physical but moral. He laid the body down gently. Then the shouting started. Alarm! A flare screamed into the sky, turning night into burning white. All units move, Harris shouted. Gunfire erupted from the far end of the bridge. Bullets sparked off steel, whining past Daniel's head. They ran. Daniel slid behind a concrete support as explosions shook the bridge. German engineers scrambled beneath it, trying to trigger the charges. Under the bridge, Harris yelled, "Stop them!" Daniel didn't think. He dropped over the side, hands burning as he slid down a ladder slick with rain and oil. Below, chaos. A German engineer fumbled with wires, eyes wide. He shouted something Daniel didn't understand. Daniel fired. The man fell into the river. Another engineer reached for the detonator. Daniel sprinted, tackled him, both of them crashing hard against the concrete. The detonator skittered away. They struggled in the dark, fists and elbows, boots slipping. The engineer reached for a knife. Daniel saw Red's face. He struck first. The man went still. Daniel rolled away, gasping, staring at the river as it swallowed blood. Above, the battle raged. Daniel grabbed the detonator and smashed it against the concrete until it broke. "Charges disabled," he shouted. A moment passed. Then cheers erupted over the gunfire. The Germans began to retreat, firing wildly as they fell back. Silence came slowly, unwillingly. The bridge still stood. Daniel climbed back up, legs trembling. Harris clasped his shoulder hard. "You saved it," Harris said. "You saved all of us." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. At dawn, tanks rolled across the bridge, engines roaring like living beasts. Soldiers cheered. The war moved forward. But Daniel stood apart, staring at the river. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt older. Days later, they entered a camp. The smell hit first. Sweet, rotting, wrong. Barbed wire surrounded rows of wooden barracks. Figures moved inside, thin, slow, barely human. A survivor reached for Daniel through the fence, fingers like sticks. "Help," the man whispered in broken English. Daniel's knees weakened. They went inside. What they saw there would never leave them. Bodies stacked like firewood, eyes too big for hollow faces, silence heavier than gunfire. Daniel handed out water, food, anything he had. A woman collapsed crying at his feet. A child stared at him without blinking. Daniel felt something inside him crack open. This was why. This was the reason behind every death, every nightmare. That night Daniel sat alone, staring at the stars. Harris sat beside him. "When this is over," Harris said quietly, "what will you do?" Daniel thought of home, of the river, of his sister. "I'll remember," Daniel said, "so they don't get forgotten." Harris nodded. Weeks later, the war ended. Celebrations erupted across Europe. Flags waved. People danced in streets rebuilt from ashes. Daniel didn't dance. He stood still as church bells rang, hands shaking, heart heavy with names. When he finally boarded the ship home, the ocean stretched endless and calm. A cruel contrast. As the coastline of America appeared, Daniel felt tears fall freely for the first time. Not just for himself, for everyone who didn't make it. Years later, Daniel would stand by a quiet river in Ohio, watching the water move slowly, just like that night under the bridge. People would call him a hero. He never would. He knew the truth. Heroes were the ones who stayed behind, in sand, in mud, in silence, so others could move forward. And every day he lived was a debt he intended to repay. By remembering, by telling the story, by never looking away. The train station was loud. Too loud. Steam hissed, people shouted, flags waved. A brass band played something cheerful that felt completely out of place. Daniel Harper stood on the platform in his uniform, duffel bag at his feet, and felt his chest tighten. This was supposed to feel like victory. Instead, it felt like standing in the wrong world. A woman ran past him crying with joy. A man laughed too loudly. Someone slapped Daniel on the back and shouted, "Welcome home, hero." Hero. The word hit him harder than any bullet. Daniel flinched. The ship had docked that morning. Since then, everything had been noise and smiles and hands reaching for him. No one noticed how he kept scanning rooftops. No one saw how his shoulders tensed at every sudden sound. Home didn't feel safe. It felt unfamiliar. His mother found him first. She was smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he was bigger. She dropped her bag and rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're here, you're really here." Daniel stood stiffly at first, then slowly hugged her back. Her coat smelled like soap and home, and something warm that made his throat burn. His sister stood behind her, older now, trying not to cry. His father shook his hand, firm, proud, silent. They rode home together, the town sliding past the car windows. Familiar streets, familiar faces, nothing looked damaged. That felt wrong too. At dinner they talked around the war, not through it. His mother asked if he was eating enough. His sister talked about school. His father asked about the weather in Europe. No one asked about the dead. That night Daniel lay in his old bed, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked softly. Somewhere outside a dog barked. He closed his eyes. The bridge came back. The river. The engineer's face. Daniel bolted upright, gasping, hands searching for his rifle before he remembered it wasn't there. His mother rushed in. "Danny, what's wrong?" He couldn't answer. He just shook. Days passed. People visited, brought food, asked questions they didn't really want answered. Was it scary? Did you ever shoot anyone? Are you glad it's over? Daniel learned how to nod, how to smile, how to say, "Yeah, and I'm fine, and it's good to be home." Inside, the war kept going. He took a job at the factory his father worked at. The machines were loud. Metal slammed, steam hissed. Every sound was a gunshot. One afternoon, a machine backfired. Daniel was on the floor before he knew what he was doing, hands over his head, heart trying to tear out of his chest. The room went silent. Men stared. Someone laughed nervously. "You okay, soldier?" Daniel stood slowly, face burning. "Yeah," he said, "just slipped." That night he walked alone by the river outside town. The water moved slow and dark, just like the one in France. He sat on the bank, elbows on his knees, staring. "I made it," he whispered. "Why did I make it?" No answer came. Weeks later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar. "Dear Mr. Harper, my name is Anna Mueller. I am writing because my brother died near a bridge in Germany. A soldier told me an American stopped the explosives. He said that soldier spared others. I do not know if it was you. I only know my brother did not come home. I want to understand." Daniel read the letter 3 times. His hands shook. That night he wrote back, "Dear Anna, I was there. I am sorry. I don't know how to explain what happened without hurting you more. I think about that night every day. I don't know if that helps. I just want you to know your brother mattered." The letters continued. Careful, honest, painful. They never became friends. They became witnesses to each other's loss. Slowly, something in Daniel shifted. He started speaking at the local school. At first he kept it simple: dates, places, facts. Then one day, a boy raised his hand. "Were you scared?" Daniel paused. "Yes," he said, "every day." The room was quiet. "And you still went?" "Yes." "Why?" Daniel thought of Red, of Miller, of the camp, of the girl with the broken bear. So someone else wouldn't have to. Years passed. Daniel married, had children, laughed sometimes, real laughter, not the forced kind. The nightmares came less often, but they never fully left. Every year on the same date, he went back to the river. He stood quietly, no speeches, no medals. Just memory. Because the war wasn't just something that happened once. It was something that lived on, in the choices people made afterward. Daniel chose to remember, to tell the story, to make sure fear didn't win twice. And in that quiet act, unseen by crowds or flags, he found a different kind of courage. Not the kind that storms beaches, the kind that keeps living. The river had not changed. Decades passed, but the water still moved with the same quiet patience, carrying reflections of the sky the way it always had. Daniel Harper stood at the edge, hands in the pockets of his old coat, breath slow, measured. His hair was gray now, his back a little bent, but his eyes still carried the weight of places most people would never see. Behind him, footsteps approached. "Dad." Daniel turned. His son stood there, grown now, with his own questions written across his face. "You always come here," his son said. "You never told me why." Daniel looked back at the river. "I didn't think I could explain it," he said, "not without passing the weight on to you." His son stepped closer. "I can carry some of it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Once," he said finally, "I stood by a river very far from here. Men were trying to destroy a bridge. If they had, the war would have lasted longer. More people would have died." His son listened. He didn't interrupt. "I stopped them," Daniel continued. "People called it brave, but bravery wasn't what I felt. I felt scared. I felt small. I felt like I didn't have the right to live when others didn't." The river whispered against the bank. "I came home," Daniel said, "and everyone expected the war to be over for me. But it never really was. It just learned how to be quiet." His son swallowed. "Is that why you never talk about it?" Daniel nodded. "Silence felt safer than letting it spill out and hurt the people I loved." They stood together, side by side. "Do you regret it?" his son asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "No, I regret the cost, not the choice." A breeze moved across the water. "I want you to understand something," Daniel said. "War isn't glory. It's not music and flags. It's decisions made by scared people in terrible moments. And sometimes the right decision still breaks you. His son placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm glad you came back," he said. Daniel closed his eyes. "So am I," he whispered. Later that evening, Daniel sat alone at a desk in his home. An old box lay open before him. Letters, medals, photographs faded with time. He picked up one photo. A group of young men stood together, arms slung over each other's shoulders, smiling like the world hadn't learned how to hurt them yet. Red was there, Miller too. Daniel traced their faces with his finger. "I didn't forget," he said quietly. He placed the photo back in the box and closed it. Outside, church bells rang in the distance, not for war, not for victory, but for time moving forward as it always did. Daniel lay down that night and slept without dreams. When morning came, the river kept moving. People kept living. And somewhere a story remained, not written in monuments or headlines, but carried quietly from one generation to the next. A story about fear faced, about courage earned, about the cost of choosing to move forward, and about a man who survived, not because he was fearless, but because he remembered why fear mattered. The war ended. The remembering did not.